All right, hey there, everybody. This is the Critical Ring Theory podcast, and today we wanted to do kind of sort of a special edition. We say special edition a lot, but sort of a special edition here because this last week, as all of you know who are paying attention to the WWE product, you have found out that Paul Heyman and Eric Bischoff are now executive directors of both Raw and SmackDown, respectively. And in this last week, in my opinion, and I would also think in Pavin's opinion, that we have seen some significant changes from what is normally happening on the product, some deviations. And I think it was loud and clear. And we just want to kind of talk about some of those big things that really stand out, because there are a few that make you think that WWE is possibly dialing back from its old ways. So it should be a pretty good one to kind of talk a little bit about. We're going to talk about maybe the top 5 things that were the coolest, because normally we don't have 5 things to talk about that are pretty cool from Raw and SmackDown, but this time I think we do. I don't know. How you doing today, Pub? Before we get into that, how are you?
I'm assuming we're going to talk about the fact that in the last 2 weeks, there's been 2 out of 3 falls matches featuring The Miz and Elias. So we've seen 6 bouts between them in a week period.
And who the hell knows why, right? I mean, I like Miz and everything, and I think Elias is useful for what he is, particularly with getting heat, with his guitar before the match.
Yeah.
You'd walk with him. Well, I mean, I don't mind walking with Elias. I used to get really annoyed by Elias, and not in the cute, like, man, is he like getting some serious heat with the crowd? But it was more like, why am I listening to this dude right now? But you know what?
So he's a natural enemy
of
yours. Duh.
He's from Pittsburgh? Oh, I had no idea he was from Pittsburgh.
And most great things come out of that's Pennsylvania.
Come on. Eagles, 2018 Super Bowl champs. No, I'm just kidding. Kurt Angle's from Pittsburgh, and I sadly have to say that because I can't think of a really famous, awesome wrestler from Philadelphia, and it hurts my soul to the core. But Adam Cole's from Philadelphia?
So, yeah, he claims that it's his. I don't know that he grew up there, but that's where he was trained.
Is it like he's a butterfly, like his cocoon was in Philadelphia, and once he burst from that, Philadelphia is now his new home?
I have no idea, because your imagery just lost me.
Really? You don't see Adam Cole as a beautiful butterfly? This is news. This is news to everyone probably listening right now, because that's exactly how I see him. Every time he raises those arms above his head with the sort of semi-finger guns motion, and he yells, Adam Cole, baby! I can imagine that being the product of Philadelphia, and also
he had an amazing,
a butterfly.
I'm going to call it a promo, but like a package on NXT this week, where so Johnny Gargano, when he was champion, went out to Cleveland, and they did some different like takes with him at a wrestling school and like at his parents' catering shop. And so it was Adam Cole visiting the catering shop where they have this walk up, like the Wall of Fame, and he like pins his own picture up there, and it's got a signed autograph of him that says, "Finally, you have a champion you can be proud of." And he orders 4 pizzas, and he goes to the wrestling school where Gargano was like all inspirational with these guys, and he was like, "I know that Johnny said it could be you, but I'm here to tell you it can't. So just give up and eat the 4 pizzas now." So just like classic heel stuff. So I appreciated that.
Oh, absolutely. When you get great heel work like that, I mean, that like there's little pieces of that seem to still exist in mainstream wrestling these days, because you think for all the intents and purposes it's pretty much gone. It's all this generated by TV writers and all that kind of stuff. But you have one of my favorite examples lately is actually from AEW, which I don't like to give a massive amount of credit to as someone who's a big WWE fan his whole life and thinks they're always going to be on top. But Chris Jericho, someone I'm a huge fan of, was at the last AEW pay-per-view. I guess he had kind of a podcast he was going to do live, and he broadcasted and he promoted it to everyone. And he decided not to do it and instead said, you know what, you all don't deserve for me to have my broadcast happen because you all are just terrible. All you fans are awful, and I'm not going to do it for you. And that was just classic heel work. That's amazing. And this kind of thing with like Adam Cole and him, it's nice to see that pop its ugly head up every once in a while, because it just makes wrestling so much more fun and feel more authentic in a world where doesn't feel authentic. To me, it gets into the whole.
So I'm all for WWE promoting the whole Be a Star campaign. I think it's great work that they go into schools and do that. But like, I do have a problem because like at its nature, you're talking about good guys or good people versus bad people. And like the bad people are supposed to be bullies. That's why you care about them being beaten up. And so like I think that at times they like sway away from it and it's just like, no, you're supposed to be a jerk who we want to see get their ass kicked.
Well, yeah. I mean, you like the idea of having a great climb, you want the great fall. So it's great to have build yourself up a great villain and everything like that. So when they fall, it's just gonna be so much sweeter. So that's why I love that classic keyword, kind of like we were talking about there a little bit. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna kind of dive into. You said kind of be a star campaign and everything like that. It makes me think of those Make a Wish
Hmm.
type foundation things, and this last week, this is kind of random news, but there was a video that was posted online from this. I don't even know what rate. We'll call the 20th rate YouTuber called Modine that filmed John Cena inside of I think it was a coffee shop, and they're really pestering him and everything. And John Cena kind of like set him straight about the idea of respect and everything. And I sat there infuriated. I know John Cena wasn't going to turn around and pop him or anything like that because he was being really annoying. But that was just one of those instances where it was so annoying to watch. What did
So
you
I
think
have
about that
not
video
seen
if you
it, but
saw
I
it?
did hear about it. I generally tend to, in most cases, agree with the superstars in this, and some of this is my own personal stuff, but I think that the age of the paparazzi and the cell phone has kind of brought out some of the worst in people, and like the other thing is a lot of the wrestlers are really good about this stuff. Like if you approach them and you say like, "Hey, can we take a quick picture, quick video?" They're usually pretty awesome about it. And like occasionally you'll get somebody who's maybe having a bad day who says no, but like usually they're very fan centric. But you'll get these occasions. I think Randy Orton had one of these a couple years ago where somebody videotaped him in a gym and he was like, no. Um, but like from my
Oh
perception and
yeah,
everything that I've read about it, because I haven't watched it, it sounded like John Cena was just like, "No, you ask for permission if you're going to record me," which is a completely reasonable thing to do. And in several states, you actually need people's permission to film them. So I side with John Cena on this one.
absolutely. And like you had said, there John Cena is very fan centric, and a lot of fans, a lot of wrestlers are. In this instance, John, this is the most fan centric person I can think of in the WWE, maybe in all of wrestling in present day. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, there's other people that are probably just as much, but they're not as well publicized. John Cena has fulfilled more
He
wishes
does
than I
have the
think
record,
anyone for Make
yes.
a Wish, and that's why yeah, and that's why I specifically orient toward him. And overall, you seem to think that he's a pretty awesome guy. And in this video, just to kind of walk you through it a little bit, in the beginning, the guy sort of walks up to him, this dude named Modine. He filmed, he's filming him, and Cena says, "Oh, by the way, thanks for asking my permission to film me." And he was doing all passive aggressive and stuff like that. But I guess that's probably the best way to handle it if you are John Cena and this is just some random loser. And the dude's like, "I'm internet famous," and he's like, "Yeah, I don't care who you are. It's a matter of having respect to be able to ask someone, because right now you filmed me in the beginning and you filmed me the whole time I was standing here trying to get coffee or whatever it was, and at the end you came up to me again with your video and you still never asked me for permission. So you know what, you got to treat people with respect. I'm going to treat you with as much respect as you've treated me with at this moment, and you haven't. So that's my advice to you. Thank you again for asking me permission to film video." And like, "I don't need to." And he's like, "Well, it's not the point. It's a matter of respect as human beings." And I was like, you know what? No matter who you are, you can throw out any kind of like legality you want to. Mind you, this I believe was filmed in the UK, so I don't know their exact their laws as it relates to this. I'm sure it's similar-ish to the United States, and that's what Pub and I are kind of more well versed in. So the even outside of the laws, it's really what it comes down to, like Cena said, kind of respect aspect. And there's so much of wrestlers' lives, they try to live kayfabe and everything like that, but they're people, dude. He was in line to get a coffee. There was no one around. There were no cameras. You pulled yours out and you decided to be a jerk about it. And that was a shame, particularly because it was John Cena. It wasn't Randy Orton, who we've heard stories about being a total jerk to other people. I've never heard one about Cena being that guy. Have you?
No, I mean I've heard like when wrestlers joke around stories about like him, I guess talking about how like hooking up with women who were overweight was like a funny thing or something. But yeah,
Oh,
well,
that was on Howard Stern. I'm a big Howard Stern fan, and I watched that episode. Howard asked him about it. He's like, I love women of all sizes. Absolutely. And he was even being really diplomatic
Yeah, I
about
mean,
it
but I
then.
think generally you're right that he's pretty well received as a just a general nice guy. Like, I mean, I think you hear some stories from like wrestlers who have been in the company who aren't there anymore, who maybe have some axes to grind. But generally speaking, most people speak very well and highly of him.
It's true. I mean, I think the worst thing I've ever heard about John Cena, straight out, is that he was responsible for the burial of Nexus and
Yeah, I mean, I
Wade
think that
Barrett.
that's
That's about
the
it.
biggest thing that's ever been confirmed. Yes, and like, I mean, he
Yeah.
wasn't him being a jerk or anything, but he was kind of a central role in the whole Punk rise, and kind of what Punk was trying to get across when he had his pipe bomb and whatnot. But like, that wasn't Cena being a jerk; it was just Cena being positioned as the best wrestler in the world, and CM Punk's issue with that.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think when Punk's podcast with Cole Cabana, I don't even think he really even came out John for that. Like you had said, it was more so John just happened to be the chess piece that they were maneuvering that was counter to Punk. So he has to throw in Cena's name, even if Cena wasn't directly doing anything to Punk. So I can definitely see that there, or using him as I guess, a comparison for like payoffs and stuff like that. Uh, because that's true. He was really upset about the payout. They're like, "Oh, you're in the main event." He's like, "Really? Am I getting paid the same way as Triple H or Hunter or not Hunter, Undertaker or Cena or Rock or anything?" Yeah, fair enough. Uh, so yes, okay, I'm gonna divert from that. But that video, that guy was a loser. I don't want to say his name again. He's not a legitimate YouTuber. He only has one. He only has 1,500 subscribers. Pardon me. And I have like, I don't know, like 17 times that amount or something. So if I'm not internet famous, he certainly isn't. Anywho, moving on. Uh, because it's the new era of SmackDown and Raw, at least that's what they've promised to us, having Paul Heyman and Bischoff as executive directors. We want to talk about possible changes. And I will say that I believe there were some very overt changes. Well, subtly overt changes on Monday Night Raw in particular, and one popped its ugly head out in SmackDown. So we're gonna try to go over kind of maybe the top 5 things that we saw as the big highlights between SmackDown and Raw for sure this past week. Since obviously they're linked a little bit with the stupid wild card rule, which hopefully after Extreme Rules they're going to do the best they can to kind of expunge that rule from going away, because according to the interview by Bischoff, the best way in order to really have 2 brands and make them really good is by making them unique, and
Screw
having the
that. We
same
need more
people show
Shane
up on each
McMahon.
brand is going to kill it. It's going to absolutely kill it. More Shane McMahon, the best in the world, and we need more Roman Reigns. Everyone knows more Roman Reigns gets people in the seats.
Sells a
Am I
lot of
right, Vince?
conditioner.
Lowest ratings ever on Raw, just to throw it out there this year. So did Fabio, but I don't
I
want
know
him
you
on my
had posters
screen.
of him.
Well,
You're
not
good.
anymore, at least. He's a little old. But hey, I was too young for
Maybe he's
that. I was
got a
born in
plague gun.
1989. But he will live on forever. Let's make that clear. Maybe that's why I'm growing my
I
hair
think you
out so
know that you're
long.
balding in
There's
front
just a
and just
secret
holding
envy
on for
to
very
it.
long.
Kind of like, oh my God, my biggest fear in life is balding. Well, that's not true. I guess dying, but it used to be dying. Well, it's still dying. Then it was STDs, and now it's balding. So we have a great
Yeah, I
progression
mean,
going on,
sometimes your
and a
depth is
serious
just
lack of
shockingly big.
priorities for sure. Oh, as deep as a puddle. So, okay. So, maybe we'll have this really loose conversational, but I have to say, when I was watching Monday Night Raw, which me and Pavin were kind of in a friend group with our buddy Mike, which will be on here at some point in the future, we usually text about these things. And I was watching Raw, and I don't think Pavin and Mike were at the time. They usually catch replays. And I saw Braun and Bobby Lashley. They had another stupid match. I was like, okay, falls count anywhere. After the whole like tug of war they had going on the week before, I was like, this is going to be silly. Maybe Heyman era doesn't really mean all that much. But when I turned it on, I see Braun push Bobby Lashley through kind of the entrance video screens. At first, I was like, well, this is one of those shocking things they do that it's interesting, but is it really going to change my mind about anything? At first, I thought, no. You saw those sparks. But when they have them lay down for the 5 minutes or so, really selling this bump here, making it seem like it was going to be like they really were genuinely awfully hurt. I wasn't into it, but I think by like minute 3, when they weren't moving, the announcers weren't saying very much, I started to believe it. I started to think back in those days, the old Attitude Era, and like WCW, like when the NWO would basically ambush all these people in the back. I was feeling it, especially when Corey Graves said "holy shit" audibly. It wasn't like under his breath; it was out loud, which told me right away this was scripted. Corey Graves did not say that like haphazardly at all, because you know what? I believe he is a full-on puppet of Vince McMahon, just like everyone else who was an announcer on that show. So either he completely was taken off the leash, or this was intentional, that he was allowed to say whatever he wanted, or he was allowed to say whatever he wanted, and Heyman would have peppered in the idea of saying like "holy shit" or "expletives" or something like that. So it was unintentionally intentional in a way, and I was just like, you know what, this signaled it right away. So this is one of my top 5 moments of the week for sure between the two shows, because that was just absolutely massive. But I mean, what was kind of your take on
I
all
think
that?
it
Was
was
Do you think it
definitely
was a little bit similar
intentional.
to mine, or what do you
I
think?
don't necessarily. I know there's a lot of talk about them rolling back on the PG thing. I don't know if they'll go full on and like go back to TV-13 or whatnot, because I do think that they can get sponsors who will do that. But I almost thought about it in relation to South Park, where they did that episode where like at that rating, how many times could they say shit? Or and so I think that they're gonna try to
Yeah, that was a good
understand
episode.
exactly what they can get away with and push towards it. I mean, it's a common source of conversation right now that it seems like they're very worried about the lack of teenagers or young people they have watching the product, because it's the first time where they haven't had this group who will then grow up and sustain with the product. So it seems like they're really focused on that, and this is one of the ways, in addition to pushing Ricochet and a couple other things. So I thought it was totally intentional. I enjoyed it. Kevin and I were talking about this before we got on there. My issue with it is that I still don't really care about Braun Strowman or Bobby Lashley in any way. Like, it was an interesting angle, but at the end of the day, they were still fighting for no apparent reason, and that's the thing I think they need to solve more of than anything else is make me care about characters again, and then I will care that they went through and got like carted off, because that I think is the missing ingredient more than anything else.
Oh, for sure. I mean, and that's it's really a shame that there's this idea that we don't care about characters as much, or at least a wide variety of characters so much, because I think that's what really propelled the Attitude Era in many ways. I mean, we somehow got behind characters that were like, one was a porn star. I remember the devastating point in my life when I was really young was when Kai and Tai like chopped off his penis with a sword, and I was devastated, partially
Well,
because I'm a male, but also because
but
I just really like Val
that's the
Venus, and
part
Val
that's the
Venus was
most
an
annoying
intercontinental
to me
champion.
about all of
That's
this
it.
is we are in kind of the golden age of television, and so you look at shows like we were just talking about Stranger Things season 3, Game of Thrones, Walking Dead. All of those shows are based largely
Oh,
on the fact that people either identify with characters or they're rooting for characters going through pretty significantly challenging times, and in this age where they have all of this amazing in-ring action and whatnot, that's the part that's missing. And kind of to a more serious example, I can remember, and this is when I was a kid, and I had this idea to maybe do this as something that we might do at some point for this, where we would tell stories about like famous wrestling moments and what we associate them with our lives. So obviously, we've talked about my love of Shawn Michaels. Um, so when I was a kid, I can
hmm.
remember the concussion angle they did where Owen Hart inseguried him and then he kind of just passed out in the ring. And I had a really crappy day that day for whatever reason. None of that stuff stays with me. But I just remember it being like that thing that put me over the edge and just going upstairs and crying. Because I was like, well, everything was like I had a really shitty day, and now my favorite wrestler may not wrestle ever again. But like I cared to this crazy extent, and yes, I was like a 12-year-old kid, but throughout the years, they still were able to tell stories that made me care. And that has really, I think, been the reason why I have started to regress, particularly when it comes to WWE product, because I was just like, well, they're not making me care anymore. So if it's just a matter of who's got the best wrestlers, I don't necessarily think that that's them.
Well, yeah, I mean, if it's, well, I mean, I would have to imagine. Well, okay, so we've been through this before. I think the best wrestlers are without doubt in WWE. Um, I I think because they're so diluted, it looks worse than it is. Because they have great people that they don't push, and I think you would agree with that. I would, at least I would hope so. But yeah. So it relates to that, but of course, because it's not as diluted, they do have these. They put the people that probably should be in the prime time in AEW or
Well,
even Ring of Honor. I think it
so I'll say on
seems better. It
average,
seems
I
more
think you're right.
efficient.
Like if you were
You
to
know,
go
that kind of
through and
thing.
grade rosters in terms of top tier talent, WWE is at the top of the list. I think, though, in terms of
Yeah.
talent and in particular telling stories through physicality, I think New Japan probably has the best roster for what they do. I think you're right that WWE has an amazing roster, but in terms of what they're trying to accomplish, I think New Japan has just as much depth and does a better job at it right now. Yeah, in the ring, particular. Yeah, yeah.
For maybe for storytelling, yes. Okay, so I'm with you on that. Oh, because I mean, like whenever anyone brings up the idea that another company has more talent than WWE, I always find that ridiculous. And that, again, that's not what you were saying. But if anyone does, I go like they have people like Shinsuke Nakamura who's not even on TV. They have they like their female roster
Well,
is
they don't
much
have a
better than
female
probably
roster.
anyone's. The only ones that
Stardom
probably come
is
close is
really
New
the
Japan,
big
um,
is the big
or not
female
Japan.
promotion there, and a lot of their wrestlers, like Tony Storm and other folks, have been signed by WWE.
So let me correct myself. Any wrestlers typically coming out of Japan. I'm not as familiar with Japan as yourself, of course, but wrestlers the female wrestlers from Japan seem to be very heavily scouted these days, and it seems like WWE is pulling a lot from them. So I guess it's depleting that pool. But it seems like WWE definitely has the best roster around. I guess other places you could have like Scarlett
Tessa,
is
yeah.
one, like
I mean,
Lisa
there's
Blanchard. Um,
there's
Tessa Blanchard.
definitely
I'm trying to
still
think of
like
other big
star
ones that
talent
are
out
outside
there. I think you
WWE.
Scarlett Boudreaux, Tessa Blanchard. There's a handful. AEW has been signing them a lot. B Priestley, Will Ospreay's wife, is really good, and so there's still enough talent out there. But you're right, and I think as we've seen what's happening right now and what they're continuing to do is they're just signing people so other people can't have them. Like it'll be interesting to see this if Luke Anderson or Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson's push um, stays consistent, or if they just sign 5-year deals to keep them locked down.
Well, that's what's intriguing to me, and I know we're deviating from what we were originally talking about, but was the club, particularly well Gallows and Anderson. I'm going to talk about AJ in this one, but supposedly they had rejected deals previously, and they were apparently lucrative. So I don't. I would have to imagine this push is going to be a legitimate one, kind of like they did for Dolph Ziggler for a while at least, or even now. Ziggler's still kind of in the picture. Um, because it seemed like they were not going to just accept money deals and to just continue to do the whole man what nerds they are type things that they were doing before. But maybe which I'm really hoping from this is one of the things that I think is another top moment of the week
Correct.
is they seems like
Mm-hmm.
AJ is a heel now. They've gotten like the club together, it seems like. And I mean, they'd ended with the whole, the whole clubs, the hand sign, the Wolfpack sign, whatever the hell you want to call it. He's a heel again, and it seems like because he's a heel, now that the club really matters, it's a club again. And I'm really hoping part of this push, at least what's involved with it, is that we're going to see some formal ripoff of the Bullet Club that's expanded. And you and I have talked about this for a long time, and with our buddy Mike.
Well, they absolutely
I'm
should.
begging
And
them
so
to
I know that we are
throw
generally
Finn in
not
there. I'm
fans of the
begging them to
wild
do it.
card rule, but I think that that's actually something that they could use to make this more interesting.
No,
So you get Finn in there, and you have the four of them, and as this collective unit, they are formidable. Like you don't go after them, but then Finn goes off to SmackDown by himself every week, and so then if they're feuding with some group, Finn's alone. So like unless AJ happens to be the wild card that week, Finn's on his own, and they can get like he can get his ass jumped. And so like that's the kind of stuff that they could be creative about, and it would make you care, but they just never go there.
no. I mean it. It's a shame because they have Finn is I like. There's so many mismatched talents. Finn drives me nuts because he's pushed all the time, but I feel like they mismanage him all the time. Like they push a guy that I don't think is that interesting, by as who he is. When you put him with the Bullet Club, he's more interesting. When you make him the Demon, he's way more interesting. But you don't do either of those things. Otherwise, he's the smiley guy who pushes his penis out all the time while during his entrance. And I don't think he's that interesting. He's in the Balor Club, but he's the only one in the club. Like, I just think he doesn't make sense. He's a guy that comes out and smiles and then does acrobatic stuff. Which, by the way, I think his finisher sucks. So there's nothing I really like about Finn all that much. But everyone always talks to me about, Prince Devitt and how cool he was in NXT. I saw him a little bit in NXT, but I saw him as the Demon. And I was like, man, that guy's cool. I want to see that guy. But on the main roster, no, we get none of that. But it will be remedied if you put him in a ripoff of the Bullet Club and have him with AJ Styles and these two guys. Because AJ with those two, it could be enough, but it could be much better. And then, of course, you could always lead to the big blow off with them in the Undisputed Era when you finally decided to
Well,
call them up.
who's
You would have a
also led by
4-on-4
another former
faction,
Bullet
which
Club
would be
member, Adam
awesome.
Cole.
Yes, and imagine what you could do. Someone's going to do the Shield thing versus
Evolution.
God, what is it called? Triple H, Flair, Evolution, the Evolution, not the Evolution, Evolution.
I don't know.
You do the Shield versus Evolution, where one of them's going to
I
turn
don't
on
know
the
if
other
we've
and join
talked
the other
about this.
crew.
I feel
Like
like
in my
maybe
mind,
we have
like I
off
think it could work.
this, but I feel like Adam Cole, they have to be so careful with because all of his best friends just started a company that seems to be doing really
Oh
well.
yeah,
And like his girlfriend is over there. And like, so like
yeah.
if they screw him up at all, you got to think it's like Deuce's guys.
You know what? That is very true. And fortunately, I think
No, I
fortunately
mean
for
I
WWE,
agree.
I
I
think they
think the
have
only
been
thing
really
is it took
careful
a
with him.
little.
At least right
I
now. I mean,
and so I'm one
they
of those fans who knows
yeah,
more about backstory than probably most. I think that he could have put the title on him a little quicker, and that's what I wanted. But I'm very happy that he's champion now. So
for sure. Absolutely, and which that's very interesting for you to say because you are probably the biggest Johnny Gargano fan I
yes, but I
know.
mean I think that it's a
Well, his
compelling
also his
story, and I
Ohio
think
ties I think
that
play into that
I
as
don't
well.
even
But
like.
still,
I think that they might trade that title back and forth for a little while. I say that all to say that I want the Undisputed Era to come up as a unit, and I think that they're all ready. Um, you know this. I love Kyle O'Reilly. I think
absolutely
he is like the douchiest guy ever when he's a bad dude, and I think that he would do really well anywhere. And so between those two, like those are the two I really like. Bobby Fish, I also enjoy, and
oh for
Rod.
sure.
This is where you and I disagree. I think heavily. Is I'm not a big Roddy guy.
I like Roderick Strong. I don't like he'll like just to be clear. Once he leaves Undisputed Era, or once they break up or something like that, I think he's done. I think he can't do a ton on his own, other than be kind of like a mid tier to bottom guy.
Yeah,
Being
well,
an
I mean, his
Undisputed
turn
Era,
was
I
great.
mentioned it. What did he join? Like 2 years ago, something like that. Oh, his term was amazing. And that's what I mean. Like at that moment, that was
Hmm.
probably when Rod Strong was right on the cusp of being completely irrelevant in NXT. That was perfect. I was like, there's nothing better you could have done with Rod, and he was the right guy to turn because he can go in the ring and he fits in with those guys. He's just he's not he's not going to be a main title guy for any company. I don't think. Well, at least not in WWE. He's not going to be on either brand or any of the brands as a main title guy. So I thought that was perfect, and that's why I like him with the Undisputed Era, and that turn was great. But I'm not his biggest fan in the world. But like as relating back to the idea of the club and Undisputed Era, I mean, I think that could be huge if you do it right. But part of me almost thinks that if they start doing the club stuff now with like a Finn and AJ and those and Gallows and Anderson, they would have to have Undisputed Era up maybe sooner, but taking on totally different people. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't figured out how you could book
I
that
will
kind of
tell
thing.
you,
Maybe that's something
I
you'll
have
tackle
a
one of these
I
days,
have a
Evan,
brilliant idea for a
in
stream
the how you book
rules.
it. Because part of me,
Yes. So, well, I'll just go ahead and do it.
oh really?
Um,
Can you give a little taste
so
of that?
you have this weird title match with the mixed tag where all the belts are on the line together. So what I would do is have a really intense match, and I think I predicted something similar to this last time, but I think it would actually be more interesting here. So I think that you have Lesnar cash in here and have him legit win, and there's this moment of like, wait, does this make Lesnar the men's and women's champion for Raw? And that's when Rousey's music hits. You have her come down and grab the title, and they're both the Heyman people, and we know who the executive producer is. And so then you get this whole kind of rich story. And then I think there's this other thing that you could do where it's like, can Becky really be mad because she didn't actually beat Ronda for the title at Mania because of that shoulder thing? So it's like, well, we both kind of got away with one. And so that's where you get to the SummerSlam where it's like the okay, we're gonna find out who really needs or who really
Mm-hmm.
deserves this belt. And if you can't get Ronda, do it with Shayna, because you still can kind of do something similar. You don't have that kind of we both got one up on each other thing, but you have that kind of UFC Ultimate Fighter backstory. And Shane has been positioned as such a beast on NXT that I think you could kind of immediately elevate her into that same picture. Plus, when she doesn't show up, you can just have Baron put on a wig.
Man, back in the day, all those text messages like, listen, man, I'm tired of seeing Shayna Baszler in the main title picture. Why is Shayna Baszler winning Money in the Bank? Good old text messages, huh? Um, I think that'd be good. I mean, Shayna Baszler, like you said, she's a complete beast. There's been one or two pay-per-views where I assumed she would eventually drop her title. I think I expected her to lose to Kairi Sane the title, but she didn't. And then Kairi Sane came up, which was good, although they have her as a freaking Kabuki warrior with Asuka, the two of most maybe underutilized women on the roster next to, I don't know, Dana Brooke. Anywho, they had that going on. But Shayna apparently is one of the people that Paul Heyman reportedly is a really big fan of and really wants to push. So I could
Well,
see in
so
coordination with like
on
Triple
that
H,
note, one of the
Shayna being a
things
really
that I
good one
read
that would
this
come
week that
up
was
there.
interesting, and we talked about this
That I could
last
see that
week,
working.
was why Triple H wasn't one of these executive producers. And apparently, it's being done to protect him. So if like SmackDown
Yeah.
doesn't go well, then that would like and Triple H had been put there, it would have been like a oh crap, because everybody knows that he's kind of the guy who will assume the mantle, and so apparently, yeah, and so apparently it was a let's protect him
Oh yeah, he's
and
on
keep him
deck
with the
for sure.
NXT because he's doing a good job there, and not give him any of the risk that may come with this. So interesting perspective.
Oh, for sure. And it was set up really well. I mean, that is very strategic. And if Vince was the one who set it up, which I would have to imagine he is, I mean, that's really brilliant. And like I mentioned, I think last time we talked, even having just Heyman and Bischoff come on, even if he's just like kind of indirectly learning from them, that's kind of a big deal. I mean, he's been learning from every important figure who's ever won one of the or ever run the most important television weekly shows in the wrestling industry in America, and that's just A+ grooming for Triple H, and I love that he's still only doing NXT. I mean, NXT is arguably the best brand in all of WWE. Actually, I probably wouldn't argue it. I think it is. Um, like, I mean, even like when you watch the pay-per-views, it's just not even close. When the Street Profits won the titles, this last takeover, I was like, this is just, or the last NXT pay-per-view, I popped. I thought it was so good. And Adam Cole and Gargano was one of the best title matches I've seen in a little while. I mean, I popped harder for that than Kofi winning, and I was on board with Kofi winning, and not as much as some other people, but it seems like every takeover or every NXT pay per view, I'm just so all about. Especially when you have characters down there like Dream. Like, come on, I can't wait till like I'm very nervous about him going to the main roster because there's just this weird line that occurs when you jump to the main roster. There are people. It's kind of like in sports. Someone can be I'm big a hockey fan, so this probably relates more to that than some other sports. But I'm a huge hockey fan. In the minor leagues, there are players that will score 40 goals and be outstanding AHL players, the American Hockey League. But once they make the jump to the NHL, they just can't cut it. They just are not fast enough or strong enough, but they excel in the minor leagues. And there are some people in NXT that I just know can't. And I don't think Dream's one of those people. I mean, he has such showmanship and he's so young that I think he can be very good. But these other people, like who we were talking about earlier, off the podcast, the Viking Raiders. I don't see an end game for the Viking Raiders. I didn't see it when they were in NXT. No matter how good they are in the ring, I don't know what the WWE would ever do with them and why I would care about them long term. Because once they're not the Viking Raiders, what can they do? Can they evolve? Can they do anything? Otherwise, they turn into the Bludgeon Brothers to me, and I hated the Bludgeon Brothers.
Well, I'm going to
So,
go back to what
like, there's
started
just
this whole
I don't know. What do you
Triple H
think?
thing.
I'm starting to
I think
ramble.
that
What do you
there's a
think about that kind
possibility
of
that we
topic?
did leave out, which is that Vince McMahon is trying to protect him so that he can be the starting quarterback for the XFL's Stamford, Connecticut team. The fighting
Levesque the QB, is that his name? Yeah. I mean, forget about it. At this point, we're gonna see like Johnny Manziel in that league.
he
By the
is
way,
not a
that's got to happen
Cleveland
at some point.
product.
I have to imagine. Got another Cleveland product to be
That
proud of.
is
Well, oh,
no, he is not. He
oh,
is
he was a Browns
a
quarterback. He's a Cleveland
proud
product.
son of Texas, and they can own him for all that they
Y'all traded up for him.
want.
He's yours,
Well, whatever.
and he's a bastard cousin of Cleveland. Then,
Shut your filthy mouth.
just like Baker. Baker's not your boy either.
Moving on. Yes, but
Anarchy. Moving
no,
on. Yeah, okay. So we've been going into the top moments
I was going to go
of Raw
back
and
to your
SmackDown. I
Viking
think we
Raiders
only
point,
hit two,
and
which
I
was
think you're
the formation
correct
club.
that it's a limited upside.
Oh,
Like,
sorry.
I
Good.
really
Yeah.
liked them in New Japan. They're great wrestlers, but they're a hard character to make you care about because like you can't really get sympathy on whatever the hell a Viking Raider is. Like they could really the most they could ever do is turn them into heels, and like the
Yeah.
thing about WWE and Monster Heels is they get one run, and then it's pretty much like unless you have staying power like a Kane type character, you're done, and you're pretty much out of the company pretty quickly after that.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, so I think so much of it is evolution. And I don't think you're going to get that from these guys. But well, I guess you never know. They did it with some of the people in the Wyatt family, although they usually play similar characters. Which, by the way, side note, as much as I appreciate Luke Harper and I think he's a good wrestler, I never really saw
He
it.
is
Like when he started doing single stuff, I was
he
like,
is
I
one
don't know
of the
where he's
most
going to go either. He doesn't really
underutilized
talk.
superstars in my opinion. So like I knew about him before he was with WWE, and like people don't realize the size he has because he was like next to Braun Strowman, but I consider him to be on the same level as Scott Hall when he was at Razor Ramon in terms of that kind of size, that kind of durability, that kind of movement. And like he kind of got saddled with this whole like crazy eyes thing, even when he wasn't with Bray. But he is so much better than they've ever let him
Yeah,
be.
man, he goes real hard
And
on the
so,
crazy
like,
eyes.
I think that whether it's in WWE or when he gets released, there is a huge upside to him. And I know we've talked about it and you don't see it, but I would not be surprised if he is one of those people that everybody is talking about once he gets the opportunity to show it.
It's so tough because I can see abilities to a degree, but ultimately in the end, I don't see the it factor. I mean, but to be fair, I mean, you can mock me for this as much as you want. Back then and now, I see an it
Well, it's
factor
clear that
more in
you
someone
have
like
been
Disco
drinking.
Inferno than I do in Luke Harper. So I I mean, I just you can say what you want, but man, dude, people pop. Um, but yeah, so Harper, that's like an example of it. Although I do have to say, at one of the live events we went to, I saw his tooth get kicked out of his head, and he just kept going. I was like, damn, go Harper. Um, which, by the way, we have Extreme Rules coming up, and Pub and I are actually going, and I'm pretty excited about it because
Jesus.
we could see Taker
Well,
and possibly his
I
last
still
match
need
on
to
Earth if
record
he's
the
not
thing I'm
careful.
doing,
Um,
but
I
the
really hope
young
that's not the
workout is
case,
something I'm
but
needing to take her soon.
oh yeah, it'll be pretty fun. Everyone loves a good Taker story. All right, we're gonna drive it all the way back because we only get to two kind of moments from the last week's shows. We have kind of the big one where Braun, basically tackled Bobby Lashley through the entrance video, and then we also have the formation or reformation of the club and AJ officially turning heel to be along with Gallows and Anderson, which is refreshing because Gallows and Anderson haven't been around in forever. I felt a little weird about Anderson throwing out there as a prize his hot Asian wife, as he said, but luckily that didn't really come into fruition anyway. So, how about you, Pavel? What do you think
I
kind of like
mean,
is a
I'm gonna
third
go
moment that's
to
noteworthy for
SmackDown
us to talk about?
and
That's a good highlight
Kofi
from this
Kingston
past
flicking off
week.
Samoa Joe and Samoa Joe being stunned by that and then getting SOS pretty quickly after that. So yeah, so again, this notion that like, well, maybe they are pulling back
Oh yeah,
some
that
of
was
the strings
awesome.
on this because I can't think of the last time they were able to let somebody flick somebody off on television. So um,
Yeah, well, like genuinely, you've watched the product longer and more consistently than I have because I watched until I don't know 2000, and then I took a gap until about
well, so
2012.
I will say that
So
I
when was
think
the last time you think
that
that you've seen anyone
Steve
use
Austin
the
gets kind of
finger
special
on
rules
TV?
with that, and so I think he does it from time to time when he appears on pay-per-views. But on regular television, God, I can't even really remember. Um,
Neither can I.
yeah, it might
Austin's
have
the
actually been The
last
Rock
one.
at some
Austin and
point
like The
with his
Rock,
feud with Cena.
maybe, but that
But
wasn't on
again, that
TV.
was like at least 7 years ago. So yeah, it's been a while.
It's been a really long time, and it cannot be a coincidence that it happens to be right when we have all these reports of saying that the third hour is going to get a little bit edgier, or well, I guess in this case, the second hour. In general, the shows are going to get edgier. Then you have Heyman and Bischoff in there, and these guys, Heyman in particular, knows about being a little extreme with programming, but Bischoff was not afraid of that stuff either. So it cannot be a coincidence that these major changes that Vince, from as far as we know, would never have allowed during regular broadcast television during the week ended up just happening. There's no way. There's no way unless it was deliberate. And it's clearly signaling something, but like just kind of diving into it, what you had said about the idea of Kofi giving the finger to Joe, and Joe, this massive monster heel that's supposed to go into houses and like terrorize you, like Brian Pillman with the gun back in the day, back in the 90s, how he seemed to be shocked by the idea of someone giving him the finger is kind of funny because it doesn't make sense, him as a mega heel, but I
I'm
mean, I
looking
guess there's
forward
got
to
to be a
next week
sell
when New Day
for
comes
giving the
out with
middle finger like
pancakes and
that because we at home
shapes
were
middle
like,
fingers.
what?
So
So I guess Oh, me too. They're gonna have pancake instead of foam fingers.
I
Gonna
would
have
buy that.
pancake fingers, and they're just gonna be giving the finger to everyone consistently. I would buy that one too, for sure. But I definitely think that was one of the top five as well. I think that was a pretty astute one for sure to toss in there. I'm gonna kind of divert real quick and say that I was a huge fan of Raw in general last week, and I was a fan of SmackDown. SmackDown was a little more boring, but Raw in general had all great segments except one. This this damn notion of Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch being couples, they are really going hard on it, and it is really getting old real quick, everybody. I cannot deal with this. The idea that, like, oh, we're the couples, we're both the double champs, we're doing great, blah blah blah. And man, you know what? We're gonna be the greatest couple that ever lived in WWE Universe. That was the only segment that drug
Yes,
everything
yeah.
down. Having Seth and her together and Becky, it was just so boring. And I am excited for after Extreme Rules when they hopefully, well, not hopefully, but
Have you
when
seen
there's
the
changing in
meme?
their
So I think
titles or
this
who their
was
opponents
at
are or
the
how
pay
they
per
approach this.
views
I'm excited
Stomping
for it to be done.
Grounds. There's a picture of like Baron Corbin like adjusting his vest, and you see Lacey Evans. Or no, it was the Raw afterwards. Like she's like adjusting her clothings, and there's this meme going around that says, "This looks like when the server and your waitress at the Applebee's hooked up in the back room." Mm. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
we are
right.
all
Yeah,
still waiting.
Corbin definitely is wearing an Applebee's uniform. Let's be really clear about that. Again, I say this as two people that are going to Extreme Rules in a little over a week. I am, and also, by the way, I am a Seth and Becky fan, not a Corbin fan. I am a Lacey fan though. I am expecting Seth and
I don't think that
Becky to
the
lose their
only
titles to
the only way
Corbin and
they lose
Lacey,
their
and I'm trying to
titles, I
brace
think, is if
myself for
Brock
it.
is involved.
And I and that's possible because I agree with you in that I'm saying that I think they'll lose, but I can't imagine a world where Corbin holds the title and Rollins is lying beneath him. I'm trying to picture that. If he couldn't do it with the Money in the Bank briefcase, I don't know why on earth he'd be able to do
Well,
it now,
the other
especially
thing
with
that they have
Heyman
set up, and this is again
supposedly in
me
charge
like
of
overthinking
Raw
their
and
rules
Bischoff ahead of
sometimes.
SmackDown.
So this is a mixed gender match that is Extreme Rules. So in these matches, typically it's guy on guy, woman on woman. What does that mean in like an Extreme Rules context? Can Baron pin
Yeah.
Becky? So like I don't think that they're gonna go there because I think that
I
they're very
I would
weary
have
of
to
it. But
imagine, yeah.
these are the
It's
things
winner
that's
takes all.
like, well, you've opened this door now, so maybe that's how they get out of it. Is Becky gets distracted, and then Baron rolls her up real quick or something.
I mean, they did kind of set a precedent with it, although it's the other way around. Which is wasn't it Mania like two Manias ago or something where it was Ronda and Angle versus Triple H and Steph, and I think Ronda like beat up on Triple H.
Well, they
So
did
they
at
sort of opened
Royal
the door a
Rumble
little
this
bit
year as
about have
well. Yeah,
intergender
you're right.
fighting, but it's usually always the female beating up the male. And
No, it was Randy in the Rumble itself, but then they did.
oh, was that Randy or was it Ambrose?
Yeah, and then they realized that it would not go well if they did it.
And then they were going to set up a whole different feud for Ambrose, right? And Nia. Yeah, thank God they. Man, that's the only reason why I care that Ambrose left is so that he didn't have to go through that. Thank God. Um, Not that Nia's fine and everything, but it's just dumb. Anyway, but anyway, yeah. I mean, that is a good way to get out of it, I suppose. It seems like they're still very willing to. Like I think during the match this past week, Lacey was like tripping up Corbin's opponent and help Corbin win and everything. So I'm a big fan of. I like how they built up Lacey, and you and I have talked about this though. I think they strapped a rocket to her back, which I wouldn't have preferred. But to be fair, they did have her come out, walk to the ring, and walk out for like 2 months before she did anything. So I guess we technically knew her, even though she didn't win anything for a long time. But I think she's just perfectly annoying. She physically looks like she could be champion over like a Becky. So that's kind of why I'm kind of expecting them to possibly win. But Corbin's the part that I just can't get over because I think he sucks. But the main thing that really fuels it all is I think Becky and Seth are boring
Well,
right now. But part of it is because of the
yeah, I
stuff
mean,
where
I
they keep
think that
saddling them with, oh yeah, by
the
the way, they're
larger
boyfriend
issue for
girlfriend.
me is
You should
that
care about them because of that.
Becky has been so damaged, and it was even happening before WrestleMania. Like they heated up that angle too quickly, and so by the time you got to Mania, there was already kind of this like, okay, is the Becky thing over? And so then after that, when she won the two belts, like there was that great like Becky two belts moment, and like I think part of this is because she's legitimately a nice person, and so I don't know that she I think she has kind of this dual personality where she's this really like nice person who loves puns, but then that badass part of her is also there, and they keep bouncing back and forth. When like it was very clearly the badass who was like ripping into Ronda Rousey on Twitter and doing all that stuff is what kind of got people's attention. And now since they've done this Seth and her thing, it's continued to be this not watered down, but just it's not the Becky that got everybody excited. And so, and some of it I think is also that Rollins, like they've never figured out how to present him in a way where people really care, except for when he had that first heel run. And so oh yeah, he was smarky as hell. Um, but like,
Oh, and he was
they've
so
never
perfect in
figured
that
out how
heel
to
run.
fully cast him as a face, and
Absolutely.
so he's supposed to be the guy right now. And like, don't get this wrong, because I do legitimately think he's one of the best wrestlers in the world. I just don't think that they've cast him really well, and now by putting Becky with him, they've just proceeded to cool her off
Absolutely.
even more.
Absolutely. I mean, the only, I mean, I have two thoughts immediately. First of all, I think it was a comment you had said, which I appreciated. They don't seize too many merch opportunities as much as they should. But without a doubt, if they're going to keep doing this, Seth Rollins should have a shirt that says "The Man's Man." Um, but second of all, this like cooling off of Becky Lynch, how you had said, it reminds me of how toward the end, right before the Mania match where Becky won the titles, I was talking to you and Mike, and I was like, listen, man, I gotta tell you, Charlotte's back better be hurting right now because I think she's carrying the feud between her, Ronda, and Becky. I know Becky was getting most of the glory because she had a great buildup. She did. She had the best buildup of the three, obviously. Everyone was behind her. The man thing is one of the coolest things that I've seen in WWE in a long time. But by the end, I thought Charlotte was really the one who's adding the sizzle. And now that Becky has these opponents on Raw that aren't that interesting. Ronda's gone. Charlotte's not there really. I mean, I think they've had a match or two, but not really. Now that that's done, I don't find her as appealing, and especially saddling her with Seth, where she's supposed to show her kind of like softer side because it's her boo. It's really cooled
Well,
off
and
the whole
again, I
man
think
thing. I
that there
got to
was a
tell you,
way that if they wanted to
they
do
are
this and keep
completely
her
crushing it.
like in
I
that kind
think,
of
and that's a shame.
man character, they could still do that. But again, I think that they've just lost sight on who she was. Like, this is the oversimplification, but she was the female embodiment of Steve Austin. And like, I'm not a Steve Austin guy, but like for her, it was working. And now it's not there anymore. And so it's just disappointing. And I hope that they
Yeah.
try to rekindle it, especially if they're trying to capture this teenage market. Because, like, that's exactly how they did it the last time, only it was a dude.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Becky Lynch is a perfect tool if they're trying to go more or less PG at the moment. I mean, she's it. Put her in an Extreme Rules match with another female that can deal with it. I mean, like I wouldn't put her with Alexa because Alexa's not going to look as good as some other people would. Even when if she's swinging like a kendo stick or something, it's not going to look as good. But put her in a match with someone else who can have a really awesome Extreme Rules match. Throw someone in a dumpster. Like I would love to see Becky throw someone in a dumpster like back in the day with the New Age
Her and Nikki
Outlaws and like
Cross could be
Chainsaw
really
Charlie
good.
and Cactus Jack and stuff. Like I think it'd be cool to have a singles match like that, and she would be great. Um, Oh, absolutely. Like if you want these things, they are definitely there. But right now, I'm hoping is, and I say this is again, once again, someone who's going to the pay-per-view. After the pay-per-view is really when they try to unleash these things. When they go like, okay, well, Seth and well, if losing her title could be a catalyst for it, but hopefully it's not. Um, they will continue to push toward that, and you'll see someone like Becky being more reckless, which she was before because I don't think you really have
Yeah, the
a
closest you had was
female
Nikki
reckless
Cross, but
character
now
at the
she's
moment. I mean,
playing
Ronda's
BFFs
gone,
with
and
Alexa.
Charlotte's
Yeah.
not. And yeah, She's Alexa's best friend. So I mean, like, what do you have? You don't have anything like that. So I'm hoping there's definitely a big change because that is a unique selling point or USP, as the British would say, for her character. But they're slowly taking it away from her because Bailey's not going to do it anytime soon. I would actually really like it if Sasha were to come back and she would have
If
some
they
kind of
do
extra
lose,
grind and
I
she
would
would be a
love for
great
Becky to
competitor for
put
Becky,
Seth in
but
the
you would have to
disarmor
probably take the
and
title
just
off
be
Becky if
like,
you're going to
"You
do that.
shit."
But uh,
I think this is number 5,
what kind of
but
like well, how about this, we go into how about this, I'll just segue into the number 4 moment now that I'm thinking about it. No, I think it's 4. Because we did the
mhm.
heel Balor Club or Balor Club, the heel change of AJ Styles and Return of the Club. Then we did the Braun and Lashley through the
Yeah.
scoreboard. Then we have
Oh, okay. My bad. My
what's the
bad.
name? Where you just damn it, you just did it. But giving the finger to Samoa Joe, and this was a worst moment of the week. This is a worst moment, but I consider it maybe it was so bad that it should be in the top 5. But then this is another one. This one kind of weirded me out. I don't know if it was a I considered it a positive because I thought it was so weird that it in a way worked and it transported me back to the Attitude Era.
But
Was Maria Kanellis
she
just
then admitted that she
berating
was
Mike Kanellis about the
again.
idea
It
of
was
not
bizarre,
being
but
man
yeah.
enough to impregnate her?
I mean, I think it's that car crash type of
It
television
was
where
really
it's
weird, but
you
I
can't
didn't
look
hate it.
away, and again, it's just interesting.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. Like, I don't really know if it led to anything. I know in some,
205
I think it
Live,
was
yeah.
what's I forget what the other show is, but Mike Kanellis. I know that he's just flat out walked out of a show, but that 205 Live, he just flat out walked out, but that appears to be scripted, part of the character and everything. And then you have this follow up where his wife is berating him for not being man enough to get her pregnant, which of course that hits the male population pretty much like in the gut, like, man, that would suck if I wasn't man enough to be able to get my wife pregnant. So you can feel that a little bit, but like, obviously you don't really believe it, but you're like,
Well, I think we have to give
weird swerve
Maria
or
a
weird
lot of
flex
love
that they
here
took. But
because
at the same time, it
she has
was
signed
interesting.
2
You don't see that
contracts
every
with the
day anymore.
WWE, I think, in the last 4 years, and both times she has gotten pregnant right after or been pregnant while signing the contracts. And
She doesn't
so it's like, well,
check.
go you, because they just signed, if I'm hearing this correctly, they both just signed 5-year deals worth $500,000 a year. So they will collectively make $5 million over the next 5 years.
Well, that's pretty outrageous if that's the case because I I don't know if they're worth it, but I mean Maria Kanellis for sure. Mike, he's not doesn't have
Well,
quite the
the other
name
thing,
recognition I think relative to her, but that's also
yes,
because
but
the
I think that the
pool's
other
more
thing that's
diluted. I think
interesting
in
here
women's
is that
wrestling,
they
so
have the
it's a different story. But
possibility of now
essentially,
doing
she's getting
the
paid to be
who's
pregnant.
the father type angle, which it seems like they want to explore, which I think would be interesting if they kind of approached it the same way they've been approaching the 24/7 title and just made it ludicrous as hell. They're not going to go there.
I would love it if they tied it into the old sex tape with Paige and made it the
One-off
accusation was it
joke
was
by
exhibiting.
the New Day does not mean that they
Are you
believe
kidding
it.
me? They have alluded to that in the past. First of all, it's a travesty. Once again, oh, they absolutely have that one-off joke. Come on, but I want to throw this out there. It's one that joke where Xavier Woods talked about. He made that mention in one of his promos. It was a one-off, but whatever. Then two, I can't believe that they didn't fire Paige right away as soon as they saw jizz on the NXT Women's title. I'm sorry, they're just not good. Anywho, I like Paige, by the way. Just throw it out there, and she looks better than ever. Anywho, moving on from there, yes, I think Maria Kanellis and this angle is a little odd, but I dug it. So I'm actually going to consider it a highlight, even though I consider it to be kind of a weird highlight from the past week. I do want to kind of give like a little sort of honorable mention, but this isn't. I guess is not technically a formal one, but I am thrilled that Ricochet is being highlighted as much as he is. It makes me so happy. I told you this before. I think Ricochet is kind of the opposite of what Vince McMahon likes in a wrestler, but I also think he's a guy you could and very much should put your title on at some point because there is arguably no one more fun to watch in the WWE in ring than Ricochet. And these guys, these acrobatic guys, I know Jim Cornette's rolling around in his non-existent grave right now, but they're really fun to watch. And when you have Ricochet go out there, do his like crazy flips and then land in the middle of the ring like he's freaking Neo from the Matrix, it gets people interested. And thankfully, Paul Heyman reportedly has huge plans to
Yeah, I
push
mean, I don't
him
have much
in the
to add there. I
future
think he
on
appeals really
the
well to
Raw brand. So I'm
teenagers.
just ecstatic about
I've
that. That's a big
enjoyed
highlight for me.
Ricochet. You and I got into a debate off air about how I still prefer Will Ospreay to him, but Ricochet is, as you said, in the WWE, there's nobody better, and I agree with that. So
Yeah, and you like if WWE doesn't notice that these guys are just so appealing to fans, then they're outrageously blind. I mean, like this past week, another highlight, although yeah, I guess it was part of a botch on the broadcast, was a big highlight was they had the Street Profits, and the people pop for Street Profits, and that's
well,
because they're good. They're just flat out good. I mean,
and I
once I
hope that
think
that's how
they
they start to
have
use these
potential in the
NXT
future
talents
on
instead of these
the main
random call
roster,
ups.
and
Like where,
you know
I mean,
NXT they're doing great.
EC3 is basically. I don't know that you can ever salvage him at this point. But like, I think if you do this, where like you bring up the Street Profits off and on for a year, and then
Poor
you bring up
EC3.
somebody else, and they're not like officially part of the product, but you do a couple things with that so they can get comfortable, and so that way when they fully are brought up, it's kind of twofold. One, they're comfortable working in either Raw or SmackDown in that layout, but then the audience has been introduced to them over time, so you don't get this weird sink or swim thing that seems to be playing out for so many of them right now. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because actually, obviously we know that like Ricochet's doing well right now. Obviously, he's doing very well. Just got off a few matches with AJ Styles, and he's the U.S. champion. But we have Aleister Black, which is kind of another honorable mention. He's been doing vignettes over the last couple of weeks that are very Bray Wyatt-y, sort of like pre Firefly Funhouse Bray Wyatt. Um, and we still don't really know what the hell's going on with that. Part of me thinks that the WWE doesn't really know what's going on with that. It's going to be kind of like a third man of the NWO. They're just going to kind of add a
There
guy
was
at last
somebody
minute and
mentioned
hope it
opening a
works
door
out.
recently, and I
Because
don't
I
remember
don't know
who
who they
it
could be
was,
referring to
but
other
it
than like
seemed
a
like
Bray
it
Wyatt at this
was.
point. So
It made sense. I don't recall who it was, but and it wasn't
yeah,
because I thought at one point that they were really setting it up for him and Bray, new Bray, but I don't think that that's where they're going with it anymore. Well, on that note, I do have to give
no,
them some
yeah, because that
credit,
would
and
be
I
a
don't know if
terrible
you've
idea. You
seen
want
this,
both
but
guys to do really
so there
well, and
hasn't
in this
been
scenario, one has
like
to
the
lose.
Firefly Fun Houses or whatever they're called, but they have had the puppets showing up in random scenes on Raw and SmackDown. So it's like this
Yeah.
slow build that it's coming, which is super subtle and very impressive for them because they tend to kind of hit you
Hmm.
over the head with stuff. And so I have been appreciating that.
Oh, absolutely. Our man EC3, if I
Mm,
remember right, he like I don't know, like the pig or whatever, the Harris or Husky Harris or whatever, I forget what he calls the pig, Husky Hog, was in the background of like an EC3 promo in the back stage area. And I was like, you know what? This is crafting a long-term story and a long-term character. These are the subtleties that are important. This is why shows like Game of Thrones get so much credit. Well, at least back in the day, got so much credit because of these little things that you notice and you go, you know what? They worried about the damn details. And WWE, like you said, normally they just beat you over the head with it. They don't explain the logic of how it's important, but they just say, it's important, believe us. And then that's it. So I agree with you. A lot of credit has to be given to them there. And this is one of the reasons why I push so heavily to go to Extreme Rules, other than it being in Philadelphia, which is close to where I am, because I would really love it. I know it's coming soon. Bray Wyatt as this, I forget what he calls himself, like the enforcer with the Joker mask. I forget, is
yeah, I mean,
gonna
I
pop
don't know
up
when it's
soon.
going to be.
It's got
You're
to
absolutely
happen,
right that it's
and
got to be
Extreme Rules
soon
could be the
because if you
place to do
extend
it.
this
And
out
I'm
too
really
far,
hoping it
you
is.
run the risk of oversaturating it and just not having a payoff be worth it. So I do think it's coming soon. I think that Extreme Rules would be a perfect event to do it at because this character seems to be multidimensional and have this kind of demonic side to it, and you can do that at a show where weapons and all those things are more prioritized. So there is the opportunity there. I think you might be on to something.
I hope we get worms projected on the ring.
Boogeyman is back in the fold.
Nothing's really changed with the WWE. They're just going to go for the worms. This has all been a convoluted mess to get more of that. He's coming to get you. uh, but I do actually, you know what? Let's say we're Extreme Rules. If based on the card, do you have any idea where you think it would make sense for
Um,
him to pop
I
up?
still like the
Like as of
idea
right now, which
of
we're a week and some change out, so
him
there's
going
probably
after
another couple
Kofi
matches going to be
first
added, but still.
with that New Day thing. So that would be a potential. I'm trying to think of what else is on the card right now. Mm,
That's a good one.
mm,
Well, I'll tell you right now, this as far as we know, which there isn't a lot, but there's the Lynch and Rollins versus Corbin and Lacey Evans, which I don't think makes a whole lot of sense. We have Drew Gulak and Tenny Nese, Bliss and Bailey, of course, Joe and Kingston, which makes a lot of sense. We have Daniel Bryan and Rowan versus the New Day versus Heavy
that one
Machinery.
could be interesting. I don't think they'll do
And the
it
last one is
there
Taker and
because
Reigns
Taker
versus
already has kind
McMahon,
of
Shane
had his
McMahon and
deal with
Drew McIntyre.
Bray, and I just don't think that. I mean, this is going into that same conversation we had last week, but unless you're putting somebody super athletic in with Taker, I think you're setting yourself up for a failure. Mm.
Oh, for sure. It's gonna look terrible. Thankfully, I'm really glad. The reason why I'm so over Extreme Rules, other than some of that extraneous stuff, is Taker has three other guys to make him look good, so it should be okay. But that is an
Actually, yeah,
intriguing
that
one.
would
I think
work
just
really
because
well
Taker is
because
kind
they
of
seem to
spooky
be
and
wanting to keep
Reigns,
Reigns away
you could even
from the
use
title
Reigns. He's
picture
a
right
guy that
now.
no
And I
matter
think
what,
that
he
they
has name
did feud
recognition,
at
and
one
if
point,
you beat Reigns,
kind of with the previous
yeah,
incarnation. But again, so maybe you have the match end, Taker disappears or something or whatever, and then Reigns is just left there, and then you have the Fireflies hit or something, because that could be an interesting one as well.
oh
I,
for sure. I mean, the only thing I could think of,
yeah, but it'd be like a
you better not
heel
do it to
taking on a
Drew
heel, which
because
would
then
just
you're
be
just
odd.
killing him entirely. Shane, I guess you could. I think it could work though, with Shane constantly saying he's the best in the world and da da da. Like just
I
that
think you're
alone
reaching,
could
but
be
I get
like,
you.
it's like an apex predator versus like a beta. You know, I could see it. I could see it. But you're right. Well, I don't know. I mean, you think there's always a bigger fish, as they say. So, I mean, it's possible. It's possible. But he's never had a beef with Shane in the past, if I remember Bray. But I guess Bray's had a thing with Taker and Reigns. No Drew, but that's because Drew hasn't really been
Indeed.
around too much while Bray was on the main roster, I suppose. So, man, it's been that long since he was in the Deleter of Worlds. That's weird. Yeah, how about that? Oh, poor Deleters of Worlds. Um, Anywho, but it would be kind of in a weird kind of way. It'd be fun if he like
Well,
started
apparently
by
that
like just
if the
eating up the
reports are correct,
cruiserweights,
that
but
brand is
it
not
would
going to exist
kind of
by the end of
further
this year.
display that the
So
cruiserweights are kind of the lower brand compared to others. So probably,
essentially, they're just going to absolve it and then put all of them like divvy them up between the two
I'd say
shows
that's a
because they
bummer,
need more
but
talent
I
to
can
fill out the
understand it.
shows.
Yeah, I was gonna say, come on, man, they already have too many. I mean, the real big problem is, and I like WWE. I would love for them to
Well, I
just toss
mean,
out all
they're
these other
controlling
guys.
the
Like,
Knoxville
I'm sure they have
County.
Big Show under contract still. Like, what are you gonna do with him? Kane,
Exactly.
what are you gonna do with him? Like these.
Mhm.
That's really what it's all about. They want to get as many mayoral candidates as they possibly can, take over all the territories inside the ring and outside. But yeah, so I think as far as the Bray Wyatt thing, like you said, there haven't been. I was actually really disappointed. I this past week I looked up on YouTube. I said, "Where? What was the Firefly Funhouse?" I missed it. That and the 24/7 title are the two most appealing
Just
things
so
over the
we're
past,
clear, if
I
one
don't
of
know,
his
month and a
puppets doesn't
half
win that title,
about
they're missing a
the main
golden
broadcast
opportunity.
shows, and I missed it. And then I realized it's because they haven't had one in like 2 weeks. But that just
I think our truth
not
is like
since David
a
Arquette.
9-time champion at this
Has there
point.
been a more deserving title holder? No,
Oh, it's gonna happen.
oh my God, he's on a run to break Flair's record at this point. Can you imagine? I do like the 24/7 title because it has made some people more appealing instantly. Like I got really excited when I don't remember if it was this week or last week, but when Heath Slater won,
I
I was
feel like
like,
they just
he's
need to
got
write
kids, good
into
for
it.
him.
Well, everything that they've been doing with
It's
Drake
just well,
Maverick,
that guy is like a
can't talk.
cockroach, man. He never
Drake
will
Maverick
die.
has been great with it too. Um, but like, I feel like they should write in like, if you're a former champion within the last calendar year, that like you get a bump in your
Oh yeah.
paycheck, and just like keep adding to the allure of this title, so that you can keep having all of this crazy stuff happen.
that that would be pretty nice. Oh my God, I actually randomly
No
just got a text,
comment.
and this is bad. It's actually from Mike. He sent me a picture of Tony Storm. I was like, man, Tony Storm, good for you. Okay. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know. That kind of came out of nowhere, but I guess on 4th of July, day where a lot of people are in bikinis and stuff like that. Holy bejeez. Yeah, she looks great in this leopard thing. But yeah, so I think that's we had kind of like a mishmash top five moments. We knew when we kind of got on here, we're just kind of messing around a little bit, but those are kind of the biggest things that happened. But I think overall, it was a pretty outstanding week of viewing for the main broadcast shows. I mean, I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head,
I
but I
mean, I will
know
say it
that in
was
this past week,
solid.
Raw's
I don't
numbers
know that
jumped
I
up
would
by
say
about
it was quality
230,000
like
viewers
across the board,
than
but
the week
I
before,
think
which is
it's
a
heading
pretty
in a
big deal.
direction that's positive.
I'm going to push back 1 second on SmackDown. I think it was amazing. I agree, it's pushing in a good direction. I only had one problem
Well,
with
I want to
Raw, and
remind
that
you
was the
that Miz
Becky
and
Seth
Elias
Rollins
had
thing.
one of the
Otherwise, I
two
thought it was
highest
actually
falls matches on Raw.
pretty reminiscent of how I used to feel during some of the shows back in the day. Not great, but good. And you know what? For a Miz and Elias
I'm
2 out of 3
not going to
falls match,
respond
I
to
thought it was
that.
good. I thought it was pretty good. I normally wouldn't care that much. I wouldn't pay attention, but I actually thought it was all right. Well, you can, of course, but I'm just saying, Yeah, but I think that's probably going to wrap it up a little bit. We'll have some more stuff coming out. Looks like Pavin's going to have kind of an Undertaker special edition for you coming up pretty soon, and of course we'll have probably a preview for Extreme Rules coming up in on July 14th, I believe, in Philadelphia. We have some cool stuff. Hopefully we'll have some new matches that will be laid out. That'll be pretty intriguing to go to the rest of them. We know that they've been teasing Shinsuke Nakamura versus Finn Balor for the IC title. I don't know if that's going to happen, or Aleister Black and someone finally walking through his door he keeps talking about.
Lots of other things.
He's supposed to be on the card
The
for sure.
G1
We just don't know
kicks off
who
tomorrow.
with. So hopefully they get added and we
week,
have a pretty exciting pay-per-view coming up here.
10-year anniversary show, so lots of other stuff to be talking about as well.
Yes. Oh, the wrestling world is pretty exciting now at the moment, and it's just a matter of getting time to actually talk about all of it with all you fine folks. All right, but that's going to do it, my friends. This is the latest episode of the Critical Ring Theory podcast. And of course, you can check us out not only on youtube.com, but also on SoundCloud, both Critical Ring Theory and also our Gmail, criticalringtheory@gmail.com. If you have any questions or comments or business inquiries or something like that you want to throw out there. All right. Looks like we'll see you all a little bit later on our next episode of the podcast. Just stay subscribed so you can find out more. Take care, everybody. Have a good day. Bye.